speaker today is Rebecca Austill-Clausen. Rebecca was the only family member that was aware that her brother was going to die soon. And she has since had many, many experiences with after-death communication. Rebecca is an occupational therapist, Reiki master teacher, author, inspirational speaker. She's had numerous spiritually transformative experiences, and she discovered her ability to communicate with her brother after he died. As with many people, she kept her spiritual explorations quiet for 20 years while exploring many consciousness-raising avenues, including shamanism, after-death communication, automatic writing, Reiki, meditation, sound healing, past life regression, crystal energy, and adventures in the fairy realm. Rebecca is the award-winning author of Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. And that book describes her empowering journey. So please welcome Rebecca Austill-Clausen.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
What a lovely service. Man, if I lived here, I would be here. But I'm from Pennsylvania, and thank you, Dave Bennett, for having me here. Thank you, Lloyd, for the lovely introduction and your readings ahead of time. Thank you, Dick. Thank you all for being here. This is wonderful. I'm totally honored. My dad's a Episcopalian minister, and it's a Boston accent, so you're going to hear this for the next few minutes. For me to be here instead of listening to my dad is quite astounding, and so thank you very, very much. I wanted to share what happened with me, and this happened in the early 1990s. It was about 1992, and my brother and I were walking at Cape Cod along Coast Guard National Seashore, and I asked him a question. David was gay. He came out when he was 20, maybe 22. And so it was a time in the early 1990s when thousands of people were dying of AIDS. It was a horrendous time. And I just casually said to him, "Hey, Dave, you've been tested for AIDS." And he looked away. And I did not expect that type of answer. Or it wasn't an answer yet. There was 10 seconds of silence. Clouds went behind the sun. I could feel coldness. My heart started to beat a mile a minute. And I thought, what is my brother going to say? And he turned back and he said, "I'm HIV positive." And I didn't know what that was. And I said, "Well, Dave, what's that?" And he said, "It goes into AIDS." And at that time, people died of AIDS in 3 years. And we didn't know why people got AIDS at that point. We thought maybe you could get it from being in the same room, or eating the same food, or going to the same bathroom. And I said, "David, how long have you had this?" And he said, 3 years. And I said, "What can I do? What can I do? Are you getting good medical care?" And he lived in Newburyport, Massachusetts, which was right outside of Boston, about 40 minutes. And he said, "I'm getting the best care possible. Going to the best physician, the best hospital. Please don't tell anyone. I'm taking very good care of myself." And he didn't want to be ostracized. He didn't want to be treated anything differently. And he said, "Please don't tell your husband, Jeff, either." And I said, okay. And so, when we're all experiencing grief, it's very helpful to have a support group. And I had no support group. And I found myself in New Age bookstores. Now, I'm a science-based occupational therapist. I didn't even know the word. I didn't know what New Age was. I didn't know what holistic was. I didn't know metaphysical. I didn't know. But somehow, I'm in Exton, Pennsylvania, Barnes & Noble, New Age section. And I started to read about the afterlife. Now, I thought this was all there was. I didn't really know that there was an afterlife. And you would think, with my dad being a minister, that I would think there was something, that there might be an afterlife. I didn't know. But these books resonated with me. And so I started to read these books, and I would try to make sure that they were professional authors and that they were valid. And when I found someone that resonated with me, Mary Summer Rain, Ted Andrews, Michael Rhodes, I would go to the very first book that they wrote, and I would read everything in order of which they wrote it. And I sent some of these books to my brother David. And so when David passed, he was aware that there was a potential that he was going to be able to still be alive. I received a call that last week at my office, and I work all the time. I had no idea who I was, so I worked all the time. That's what I did. I love to work. And the call came in at 10:11 in the morning, and it was my parents, and they said, David's been taken to the hospital in an ambulance. And David always said if he left his home in an ambulance, he was never going to come back. So I said, all right, I'll be right out there. And I flew out and saw David in the hospital. And you know what the first thing he said to me was, I'm so sorry to take you away from work. And I thought, oh, my priorities are absolutely wrong. Of course I'm glad to be here, David. And it was horrible, a horrible time. I couldn't understand it. Couldn't understand 37-year-old brother. Gosh, normally don't get emotional about this, but anyway, a couple of days before he passed, I saw this room in the hospital corridor where he was, and it was called a meditation room. I had no idea what meditation was. I thought, that'll be interesting. Let me go in here. Let me go into the meditation room. So I went into this beautiful room, stained glass window. It was quite lovely. And sat down. I was the only person in this meditation room. And I sat there, and I thought, let me call for Edward. Now, my brother's best friend, Edward, had passed about 6 months ago. And Edward was a childhood friend. He always came over to our home, and he was big, 6'7", and so he would duck down to get into the kitchen. And so I said, Edward, would you please take care of David? Now, I had no idea about anything, but I thought, well, let me see if I can get Edward. Well, Edward appeared. I had never, ever, ever done anything like this. Edward's face, smiling face, beautiful, beautiful yellow hair, big smile, appeared right in front of me, and then Edward grew. He grew and grew and grew, and his head reached the top of the ceiling. And what he did is he put his arms out in a cross, which made me feel good. I'd grown up in the Episcopal Church. Wasn't sure if I really believed what I was hearing, but for me to see Edward and have him put his hands out in the shape of a cross felt great. A couple other things happened in the hospital, and I did share these with my folks, and my dad said, Beck, people deal with death in all sorts of ways. And it made me feel okay, because I thought, all right, I'm not an imbecile. He hasn't said you're nuts. I said, okay. A week later, David had been living with one of his very best friends, Lorene, for 5 years. And they had 2 separate bathrooms and such. They were very good friends. Lorene calls me up and she says, hey, Becky, do you have a minute? I'm like, oh, yes, I definitely have a minute. She says, I wanted to share something that happened. She said, I got up at 7 o'clock in the morning and I went into my bathroom and I heard a knock. And she thought, what is that? And she had a claw-tooth bathtub, and she looked under the claw-tooth bathtub, and nothing was there. And she opened up the closet, and nothing was there. And she looked under the sink, and nothing was there. And she looked up. She had a skylight, and in the skylight was a raven. She thought, a raven? What is a raven doing here? And her dog, she had a little Bichon, white Bichon dog, was going nuts, absolutely running around, barking, just going wild. So she got a broom and she shushed it away. She says, go away, go away. The next morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, just like she always does, gets up, goes into her bathroom, and hears the knock again. She left the broom in the bathroom. She took the broom and said, go away, go away. Third day, she goes into the bathroom at 7 o'clock in the morning. And what do you think she heard? The knock again. She looks up and she said, "David, I know you're here. I'm okay. I miss you. I love you, and you're scaring the dog. Could you please not come back? You're scaring the dog." The raven never came back. 6 weeks after that, I was riding my horse through a Christmas tree farm, and I was filled with grief. You know, we just can't feel anything when we're so despondent. But it was a beautiful day. It was right about now, actually. David passed on October 1st, 01/95, or 1/01/95. And I couldn't understand why he passed. Made no sense to me at all. I think everything in life is positive. I could find nothing positive about my 37-year-old brother passing. But we had just had our first frost, sort of like what's happening now. And icicles were sparkling in the trees, rainbows were around, and I opened up my heart just a little bit so I could feel something other than the grief. And I said, thank you, universe, for a beautiful day. And I closed my eyes, and there was my brother. And he was as closer actually, than you and I are. And he was wearing a black and red plaid flannel shirt, dungarees, and sandals. I had never, ever, ever seen anything like this, done anything like this, and so I started to talk with him. And I realized after about 2 seconds that I could just send thought. And he was great, and I was great. I'm with my brother, for Pete's sakes. Oh my gosh. And he was healthy. He looked about 30. He passed when he was 37. He looked healthy. He was smiling. He was fantastic. He was on a grassy hill. I looked to my right. There was my grandparents that had passed about 10 years ago, my maternal grandparents, Grandma Bessie. Grandma holding hands, she's 4'10", with her 6'2" tall husband, Abe, just like they always did. And beside them was Edward, smiling. Beside Edward was a friend of mine, Holly, who had passed when she was 20, so that was a long time ago. And I thought, oh my gosh, beside them were 24 other people. And I've been a church organist. I love the music, played the piano in church, so the scene was luminescent. Oh my gosh, there was music in the background, and it was fantastic. And I knew that these people, these 24 other people, had passed because I played for their funerals. I was filled with joy, filled with love. I'd never experienced such love. I looked behind my brother, and there was a golden arch, not McDonald's. Wasn't McDonald's, but I had been reading in these books that if you see a doorway, it could mean that you're going to go into another form of reality. So I looked to David and thought he would take me through this door. And instead, my 4'10" grandmother skips with me through the door. Now, on the other side of this door was a fuchsia-colored land. And my husband and I have 2 kids, 2 boys. They've heard this story a few times, as you can well imagine. And they say, Mom, do not say fuchsia. It sounds like you're high, it sounds like you're tripping, it sounds like you're drunk, it sounds like you're loaded. I wasn't any of those. And I'm like, it was. It was brilliant fuchsia. On the other side, in this brilliant fuchsia-colored land, was my paternal, my dad's father, my grandfather, Gramps. I didn't see him. I was lucky to see people. I didn't see him, I heard him. And he said, "Get over here." And he took me by the hand, and we flew for hours, what seemed like hours, reminiscing. Gramps had passed, he passed about 15 years ago. So we're sharing and reminiscing, and we're having a wonderful time. And then all of a sudden, my horse starts to move. And so I'm flying with Gramps through this fuchsia-colored land, and the horse is walking. And I say, Gramps, I need to go back. We do this U-turn in this fuchsia-colored land, and we come to the golden arch. He deposits me right at the arch. I fly through the arch. The horse is still moving. My brother's there, Grandma, Grandpa, Edward, Holly, 24 other people. Horse is still moving. And I say, I need to go back. And you know what the answer was? We're always here. We're always here. I pulled up the reins and I sat on top of my horse for a long time. And I thought, what just happened to me? What just happened? It was the first time in my life that I believed life was eternal. Growing up as a PK, I certainly went to a lot of services, but for me, up until this point, I couldn't figure it out. Religion didn't work for me. I tried, but it just didn't work. I was an agnostic, I was an atheist, I was in the Rainbow Girls. I don't know if you know the Rainbow Girls, but it's part of the Eastern Star, Masons, DeMolay, Rainbows, the young girls, young teenage girls group. It's a charitable organization. And I'd been elected worthy advisor. And it was a long training period, about a year and a half. And I'm studying the ritual for acceptance of worthy advisor. I'd finally reached that peak. And in it, it said, do you believe in God? And quite frankly, I didn't know. And I thought, oh my gosh, because I'm very honest. I don't know if I can accept this position as worthy advisor. And I thought about it for a long time. And what I decided is that there is a God, and some people believe in it. I just haven't found it. And that gave me the courage to say, okay, I'm going to participate in the Rainbow Girls and help lead this charitable organization. But I never really could find God up until this point when my brother passed. When my brother passed, and I saw all of this, and I had this wonderful experience, I wanted to do it again. I went to look for a teacher, and I went to the library, because this is 1995, because we didn't really have the internet. And so I'm walking up and down the library corridors, and I didn't know what happened to me. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what to search for. And I think I thought a book was going to fall out and be the book that I needed, and that didn't happen. And so then I went to the health food store, and I looked on the bulletin board, and I thought, maybe something will resonate. And it did not resonate. I'm looking for a teacher. And I thought, let me ask the universe, which I'd never done. I'm the type that creates my own path. I asked the universe to please send me a teacher. A couple of weeks later, a friend of mine, and I'd had a big rehabilitation practice, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. One of my staff, Dr. Amy Carroll, occupational therapist, came in, and she said, Beck, how you doing? Now, I didn't share this with anybody. My husband knew, my parents sort of knew, but I was not making this public. And so I said, oh, it's rough. It's very rough. She says, I met somebody I think you'd like. And I'm like, really? She says, I met a shaman. And I'm like, well, what's a shaman? And she said, well, I'm not really sure, but she believes that everything in life that's natural has energy, and she talks to people that have passed on. I'm like, really? Well, where does she live? Her name's Nancy Ariel, and she lives in Reading, Pennsylvania. Now, Reading, Pennsylvania is an urban city. And I thought, oh my gosh, if there's a shaman, if there really are things like shamans, I thought they might live in Brazil or Peru or someplace quite lovely. But Reading is not where I would think of as a shaman. But anyway, I went to meet with Nancy, called her up. I apprenticed with her for 3 to 6 hours a week for a year. Certainly learned how to talk again with my brother, met tons of spiritual entities. It was unbelievably exciting. The very first day I met Nancy, she said, Becky, let's go on a shamanic journey. And she gave me some Reiki, and she said, let's go on a shamanic journey. And I have all of this recorded. I recorded every single session with her, so it's really exciting. And she said, you're going to receive a message from a bird. And a bird's going to take you to the upper realms. I wasn't sure what kind of bird was going to come. But you know what kind of bird came? Raven. Yes. And it took me years to realize that that raven was the same raven that came to Lorraine. But anyway, I climbed onto the back of this raven, and we went up, and we went up, and we went up, and we went up. And then I hit a dark tunnel. And I went through this tunnel on the top of this raven and ended up in a beautiful light-filled area. I have never in my entire life experienced such light, white light, joy, peace, love. There were 5 beings. They were men for me. They appeared as male. One man who I couldn't see the face. They had capes around them. So I couldn't see the face, but I could see the image. One man stepped forward. For me, I was in the presence of God. My whole life, I had searched for something, and I was in the presence of God. I kneeled down and absorbed the beautiful love and energy that was right there. Nancy, my shamanic teacher, said, Becky, ask a question. Well, I thought, oh my gosh, what question do I ask God? I had never contemplated asking God a question. And so I said, where do I go from here? The answer was, love yourself. Love yourself. Well, I had never loved myself because I didn't know who I was. I had no idea who I was. Nancy says, ask another question. So being a workaholic, I was thinking about work for the second question. And I said, if I get involved in this, whatever this was, if I get involved in this, will my work, my kids, and my husband be okay? And the answer was yes. Yes. Everything will be fine. Nancy said, one more question. Ask how you'll know if you're in the presence of spiritual communication. And the answer was, you'll receive a feather. And you know, the feather relates to the raven, it relates to birds, and I see feathers all the time. Because we're all connected. We're all one. We're all part of the same wonderful universe. There's no difference between our world here and the afterlife because we're spiritual beings living in physical bodies, and you all know this. But it's really resonated with me lately. We are spirit, and because we're spirit, we can communicate with our spiritual loved ones. We want to believe we can do it. We want to trust our gut, trust ourselves, express gratitude, and of course, share love. Because love is the strongest emotion there is. Love passes all dimensions. Love is always received by our deceased loved ones, whenever and wherever you share love. Nothing is stronger than love. So I wrote this book called Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life. As Lloyd said, I was scared to publish it. I thought people would think I had lost my mind. And this covers the first year where I learned about love, how to communicate with David, tons of spiritual entities, and then it has these little illuminations at the end of every chapter. And that's where I talk directly to the reader. And I say, what do you think? What do you think? Here's some suggestions, some activities, some skills that you may want to participate in. In the back of the book are 275 books that I read during that time that David was dying, organized by chapter. So if people would like to maybe replicate what happened, you can just go to the back and look at the chapter. I also thought, if people think I've lost my mind, at least they'll know I'm a well-read imbecile. So I sold my business, had a huge business. By the time I sold it, it was about 400 staff, 13,000 clients a year. I sold it to my CFO, my chief financial officer. It was a wonderful gift. We worked together for 20 years. And I got this published with great trepidation. I thought, what is this going to do to my profession? But I didn't care. My soul cried out for me to publish this story. About 6 months later, my husband and I are visiting all the national parks. It's a great quest. 61 national parks. We're in Olympic National Park in Washington, 4 hours from Seattle, in the whole rainforest. Beautiful. We have a rainforest in the United States. It was awesome. That evening, I was checking my email, and it said, "Congratulations, Rebecca. Changemaker. How my brother's death woke up my life, has received 3 National Book Awards, and can you please come to the Book Expo of America in New York City and pick them up?" And I'm like, oh, wow. And it was such a validation for after-death communication hitting the mainstream. And so I'm here this weekend. I've had a wonderful time at IANS teaching a workshop on how anybody can communicate with loved ones. And I'd like to end this talk by reading my dad's favorite poet, Mary Oliver. Mary Oliver is a Pulitzer Prize winner poet. Beautiful, beautiful woman, just passed about a year ago. And this is called the frontispiece of my book. Frontispiece is a short little phrase or poem or quote that you start a book with. So this poem by Mary Oliver is called "The World I Live In." I have refused to live locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And anyway, what's wrong with maybe? You wouldn't believe what once or twice I have seen. I'll just tell you this. Only if there are angels in your head will you ever possibly see one. Thank you all so much. You're wonderful.